Well, good evening and welcome everyone to this session of Writing with Flair and Marketing with Technical Knowledge. It's a twofold webinar that helps prospective budding authors gauge the entire field of writing and also the field of marketing and promoting your book. So I'm going to begin tonight with a recap of the first part of our session. As we go into the depth, as you shall see, of the 7 writing guidelines or fundamental principles to writing. But first, I want to recap, first of all, one's writing philosophy. And your writing philosophy relates to what Proverbs calls wisdom and the book of James calls wisdom. And a very basic definition that gives you a handle on wisdom simply means your insight into life. Your wisdom is your insight into life, and that's philosophy. So philosophy, like theology, drives what you believe and what you do. In this context of writing with flair, it means you write from your insight on life. So always remember your philosophy to writing, because you write from your insight on life. Keep that perspective before you, and you will very seldom have writer's block. Can I get a witness out there? Give me some feedback. Exactly. So always keep that. Your life is your story about life, and that's your philosophy. So good writing begins with writing philosophy. Now, I want to highlight again the writing progression chart to make a point about writing that is like unto public speaking. Now, if you can write well, you can become a good public speaker. In terms of public speaking, it's simply a matter of getting over your fears and your phobias about being before an audience in your ideology of wanting to be perfect in your articulation and in the recall of your thought. But some nerves are good for public presentations, not overemphasized nerves, but some nerves are good. If we don't have any nerves, that can lead to arrogance. And public speaking is the communication of personality to the audience, and that'll come across to the audience. What's in your character will come across to the audience in public speaking. Likewise, what is in your character will come across to the audience in your public speaking. So I think that's a good note for all of us to recall and to keep in mind for public speaking and for writing as it relates to our philosophy. What you see before you now is a writing progression chart. It begins with an introduction or a beginning, and it ends with what is called an epilogue or a conclusion. You can also put a prologue in the introduction or the beginning of your writing. And a prologue is a little different from an introduction, although it is an introduction, but it's more of a critical introduction, where you give your audience a little of the end from the beginning. You give them some of the story without giving them all of the story. That's called attention in the 7 guidelines of writing. And attention simply means you want to get into the reader's head by writing what you think the reader is thinking to draw them into your story. Did you get that? So whether you write prose or poetry, whether you write novels or narratives, whether you write an autobiography, whether you write an expository book, it is the same concept. So you want to begin by getting the attention of the reader and, in public speaking, the listener, so that you can draw them into the story, draw them into the message, and, so to speak, get into their head. And so from there, from the introduction, the beginning, there's an upward climb at a diagonal, at an angle rather, where you're going up slowly but surely. Then you level off in the middle of your core context of the body of your book. And that's the place where you give your reader, your audience, a chance to breathe, a chance to take a deep breath. Because if we're doing descriptive writing combined with whatever other category of writing we're doing, what we're doing is appealing to their emotions and we're appealing to their passion. And then from the middle, we continue to climb, level off, continue to climb until we get to, so to speak, the crescendo, the epilogue, where we give a summary of what we've written, of what we have spoken in the conclusion. So now that is the basics of your writing philosophy and the progression chart that goes with it. Can you still hear and see me? Yes, I still hear you. Yes, I can. I hear you very well.
What you're telling me is sort of like a teaser to get the people interested, to draw them in.
Yes.
So when you do a paragraph, it's like the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why.
Exactly.
Sometimes how, which draws a picture of what you're going to talk about, and then you go ahead and expound on that.
Exactly. You want to create a visual. Good writing creates visuals. We want to animate and we want to personify, especially in informal writing, okay? So that's important that we keep that in mind. Very good analogy or comparison. So that means you've gotten the thought, okay? Now, let me briefly recap some things about marketing. You know, there are, first of all, 3 basic areas of marketing when you are marketing your book after it has been published, distributed, and released. And the first begins with your metadata. Now, I shared with you last time that your metadata goes into your ISBN. And your ISBN is like your social security number. It identifies the vital description of your book and the key meta tags or the key words that will optimize search for people who Google, which is a catchphrase, or who search for a book of your type. You got that? If it's a poetry book, then it will be a certain type of metadata that begins with a hierarchy or the grandfather in your domain name, poetry. You follow me? Okay, Robert, welcome. I'm going to invite you into the duplex, my brother. So we should be able to hear you and possibly see you too. So Robert, can you hear us? Give me a yes on the chat bar or just say yes. Make sure everything is properly set on your settings in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, so let's continue here. So let's continue with the marketing aspect of it. Okay? Let me chat something here to Robert. Huh? Can you hear me, Robert? And can you see me? Okay, I'm not getting a reply from you, so make sure your settings are in place, Robert, and I'll continue in this webinar, and what you miss, you'll pick up on the video. Now, so good marketing begins with your metadata placed in your ISBN. So whether you are being published with a traditional publisher, a vanity publisher, which is a subsidiary of the traditional publisher, like Create Space is to Amazon, or whether you are an indie publisher, which is short for independent, which means you're a self-publisher, you should let each agency know as you write your book, your description of your book that will also go as a blurb on the back cover of your book. So your book description or metadata description that goes into your ISBN is a paragraph, a thesis themed paragraph of about 7 or 8 sentences. Did you get that, Marty?
Yes.
So make sure you understand that. As you write, make sure that you think of a paragraph that is a thesis and theme that will describe your book. That goes into your ISBN along with other vital information about you as the author. Then there are the meta tags. That is the keywords that begins with the grandfather or the hierarchy of your domain name. For you, Marty, that would be a poetry. For you, Robert, that would be a narrative book or a novel. And then you break it down from there categorically. Okay? And so that will give the keywords to search out. The second thing is your contacts. Pull all of your contacts from social media and from the other contacts that you have on your tablet or your laptop. Then individualize and personalize emails to each of those people promoting your book. The third thing is opening an account with YouTube if you don't have one. If you have one, doing 10, 15-minute videos from excerpts of the most exciting parts of your book. For you, Marty, it will be one of the better poems that you think. And depending on the category and genre of your book, it will be those exciting parts. You read it, then you link it to your social media, and you put it on your website. Now, the fourth basic, did you say something, Marty? Okay. Now, the fourth basic in marketing is building your website. And there are free and inexpensive, decent ways to build a website. I like GoDaddy Central. Okay, I think it's good in terms of being inexpensive. There are others that are out there, but I like GoDaddy Central. but build your website and connect it to your social media sites. Now, the fifth basic that we're going to end at and go into the 7 principles or guidelines for writing is analytics. Go to Google Analytics and set up an account. And now it looks very technical, but again, it's a personal tutoring process. But analytics will help you identify who visits your website, the number of people who visit your website, where they come from, and how you can develop your mass emails or your individualized emails to reach them and encourage them to come back. Did you get that, Robert and Marty? Oh, okay, so those are the 5 basics. Now I'm going to go through in this second session knowing the 7 principal guidelines for writing. Let me say that again. The 7 principal guidelines for writing. So we're looking at the writing industry and what it entails. So let me begin by making this point. Some editors make the mistake of editing merely as rules for grammar. Now, what you'll see, the first guideline or fundamental pattern for writing, and they're called fundamental patterns because in terms of the parts of speech, the basic parts of speech, there's flexibility with informal writing in terms of what is considered standard editing with formal writing. Now, you'll understand that better as I go along. So when you use formal editing standards in formal writing, what you do is you edit the life out of the story. And I'll explain what that means shortly. So, there are no etched in stone grammatical standards for writing, especially for informal writing. For formal writing, yes. And so let me give you up front what formal writing is in 3 succinct words. Formal writing is professional, academic, business writing. So understand that, and that's where you implement standard editing techniques, but not in informal writing. Now, this is where a lot of people go awry. So let me reiterate, you can edit the life out of a story using formal editing techniques in informal writing. Now, the grammatical structure depends on several dynamics. Dynamics is the life behind the writing. Life is dynamic. It's important that we understand that. And so the grammatical structure depends on the several dynamics for writing that are within several guidelines. When we consider informal writing, the informal writing category, the basis of most narratives and novels are not standard grammar. Obviously, poetry isn't, Marty. Expository writing, which defines and explains, argumentative writing, those categories formal writing, and they stick to professional editing standard techniques. Now, you'll get this as we go along. It's a lot to retain, especially for the novice, okay? Now, informal guidelines are flexible guidelines. Genre of writing, which is within the fourth guideline of mechanics of writing, is your style of writing based on your audience. Now that's genre. So you have a certain style of writing. It may not be grammatically correct because of what is known as idioms, but it is your style of writing. So although it may not be grammatically correct, it still can become grammatically correct in informal writing based on your style of writing. Did you get that, Marty? And I don't see Robert anymore, but okay, great. So remember that. Now, the basic philosophy, listen to this, for writing, and listen to this clearly. Remember, we started out with the philosophy for writing. So the basic philosophy is let go and flow. Then come back to make grammatical corrections. Did you get that? So that's one of the ways you avoid writer's block. Let go and flow. So we've seen some things. The guideline that you utilize in writing informal writing has to do with what you want to say, to whom you want to say it, and how you want to say it. That's your flexibility. What you want to say, to whom you want to say, your audience, and how you want to say it. Now, let me give you those 7 guidelines that we're going to go into individually, and we're also going to go back into some marketing techniques for your book, but that's going to be the Tuesday after next. We're going to hold that to the Tuesday after next. I'm just going to give you those 7 guidelines or fundamental patterns that govern writing, and we're going to stop here, okay? Okay, in writing, those primary guidelines, remember, they're not standards. There's a difference between standard editing, again, with formal writing than from informal writing. In informal writing, they are guidelines because the editing is flexible. So there are fundamental patterns that govern writing. So I'm going to give you the 7 guidelines here. The first guideline is formal and informal writing. And I'll elaborate on that so you can clearly understand the difference between the two. The second fundamental pattern is category or kinds of writing. The third fundamental pattern is point of view, or what I call your person perspective. So are you writing in the first person, the second person, or the third person? Now, depending on the genre of your narrative or your novel, you can write it in the first person or the third person. Narratives are usually written in the third person, the omniscient third person, or from out of the story. You become the narrator from out of the story. Or you can become the first person in the story. Okay? So that is your fourth fundamental pattern. Now, the fifth is mechanics of writing. And there are 4 mechanics of writing. And you'll be able to memorize these things because I'm going to give you an acronym that works as a mnemonic device. A mnemonic device is something that easily calls something to your memory. And I use acronyms. But there are 4 mechanics for writing that we're going to look at. Now, the fifth is attention. Attention is getting in the head of the reader. Writing what you think the reader is thinking, so that you can draw the reader into your story. You're speaking into their mind. That's attention. The 6th is understanding idioms. Idioms are commonplace language. Basically everyday speech. Based on your dialect, based on your speech pattern. And so usually writers write like they talk, which is grammatically wrong. So they misplace punctuation, they misplace prepositions, they use improper parts of speech, but because it sounds correct to them, they think it's correct. And that's called idioms. Now, there is a place to use idioms, and we'll talk about that. And the last, the 7th guideline, fundamental pattern for writing is called euphony. And Marty, you'll understand this in poetry. Because euphony is the smooth flow, harmonious flow of agreeable words. The smooth, harmonious flow of agreeable words. Whether you're writing a novel or a narrative, the words should be smooth. They should flow from sentence to sentence, and they should flow from paragraph to paragraph. Now, those are your 7 fundamental guidelines. We'll begin in our next session to elaborate on each of those guidelines and take you through some more of those fundamental marketing skills. So how's the lesson? been a blessing to you tonight? Has the session's been a blessing to you? Robert? Marty? Great. Well, I'm going to pray you out. Remember, coming June 12th is another webinar entitled Race Relations Matter to God. These sessions are designed to enhance and empower your leadership skills. So remember that. Don't let the topic deter you, because it's going to help you in whatever capacity of leadership that you're in. And you'll see that. It's about much, much more than racial reconciliation. So let's get the ball rolling. Let's get enthusiastic about it. Let us put ourselves at a place of receiving God's blessing under His priority and find the success that He has ordained for us. Can I get a big amen from everybody?
Yes.
Great. Great. I hear you too, Robert. Super. Well, let's close with prayer, and then please just sign out, okay? After I close with prayer, just click the sign out up at the right corner.
Okay.
Let's close out with prayer. Gracious God, thank you. You are so good. We are short of words to really describe how good you are in so many different ways. Let the unction of your goodness go out, Lord, along social media, along all of the channels where people are in dire need of a word from the Lord, and for a word that will enable them to find good success. Bless those who came and visited and participated with the webinar tonight. Give them blessed sleep, guide their lives, heal their bodies, heal their minds, and bless them as a witness for Jesus Christ. Amen and amen.
Yes, Lord. Thank you. Amen. Amen. Have a good night.
You too. Good night.